Ramadan, Ramadan, Ramadan ya Habib, Ramadan, Ramadan, laytaka dawman qarib.
So, number 5, fifth benefit of fasting, he says that fasting distances you from sinful acts. Keeps you away from sinning. When you're fasting, you will not sin, provided that you act upon the ahkam. You understand the rule of fasting, which we will be mentioning inshallah. And the sixth benefit of fasting is that you will sleep less. You will sleep. If you eat a lot, then you will sleep a lot. And the seventh benefit of fasting is that it creates ease in ibadah. It makes ibadah easy for you. When you're fasting, you will not feel lazy. When you're fasting, you will have sukoon and ease in ibadah. And the eighth point is, with less food, you will have qana. You will be satisfied with less food. You will be happy with less food. You will eat less and you will be content with that. And that is the training that we have to go through in Ramadan. Not to overeat at suhoor time and sahri time and iftar time. To eat less. And that is one of the training that he mentions. That you will be content with the little sustenance that you have. And number 9, fasting gives you good health. Fasting is healthy. That is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the 10th is that you have the jazba. You're motivated to give in the path of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So you will have a lot to give in the path of Allah. You will go through the training in the month of Ramadan to eat less. And for the remaining 11 months, that itself will be helpful and useful for you to eat less in the remaining 11 months. And when you will eat less, you will have a lot of food left to give to the poor people. So it increases the jazba of khairat and sadaqah. So these are the benefits of fasting, and each point is about taqwa. It is about al-vikaya. What does the word taqwa come from? The word taqwa comes from al-vikaya. And al-vikaya is the origin, and the way it's applied, it is taqwa. Taqwa la'allakum tattaqun. So now the goal of fasting, the ultimate goal of fasting is to attain taqwa, and there are 3 points in taqwa. The first one is to have yaqeen that Allah is watching you. Allah can see you. Everything that we do in the month of Ramadan, we have to keep reminding ourselves, Allah Jalla wa Ala is observing my state. Allah is aware of my state. Allah is watching me. In this, it is important that the way we claim, nowadays everyone claims, as I was mentioning earlier, that I have the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala is a great maqam. The true khawf of Allah Jalla wa Ala is a great maqam for a believer to achieve. Once, Sayyidina Jibreel Amin, he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now imagine this spectacle. Now I want everyone to imagine this. Imagine Jibreel Amin in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he talks about Jahannam. And this is something I want you to take with you. Learn this waqiyah and constantly remind yourselves, and we will all remind ourselves, this is an advice for myself and for everyone present here, to think about Jahannam and to truly create the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala in our hearts, and to understand how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam thought about Jahannam, and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would react when Jahannam was mentioned in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So once Jibreel Amin came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a hadith which is narrated by Imam al-Tabrani rahimahullah in his Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat. So Jibreel Amin came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he mentioned Jahannam in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I take a qasam upon Allah, the one who has sent you as a true Nabi. If Jahannam was open to the size of a sewing needle, the whole of a sewing needle, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the heat of Jahannam and the intensity of the heat of Jahannam would be such that the entire dunya would burn. This zameen would burn. Jibreel Amin is saying that to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then he says, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, by the one who has sent you as a true Nabi, I take a qasam upon that Allah, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the inhabitants of Jahannam, the clothes that they wear, if one cloth was placed between the heavens and the earth, one cloth was hanging between the heavens and the earth, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, with the heat of that cloth, the entire dunya would burn. Then Jibreel Amin said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, by the one who has sent you as a true Nabi, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, one of the angels who are appointed in Jahannam, if one of those angels was to appear in this dunya, everyone living in this dunya would die if they were to see that angel. One angel, if he was to appear before the makhluk of Allah in this zameen, in this planet, everyone would die if they were to see one of those angels who is appointed in Jahannam. And then Jibreel Amin said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the chain which is mentioned in Quran, the chain in Jahannam, if one halaqah of that chain was placed on the mountains of this planet Earth, all mountains would be destroyed. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam heard this, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Oh Jibreel, stop it. This is sufficient. Oh Jibreel, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Oh Jibreel, stop it. Enough. This is sufficient. If you keep talking, I fear that my ruh will depart with the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. I fear that my visal will take place. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said this to Jibreel Amin started to cry. This is the angel of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Compare the angel's fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala compared to our fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. He started to cry, he started to weep. He was weeping in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Oh Jibreel, what makes you cry? Oh Jibreel, why are you weeping? Do you know what Jibreel Amin said? Jibreel Amin said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I fear that whatever is in the knowledge of Allah about me, what Allah knows about me, I fear that what if that is different than what I know about myself? Meaning, we know that the angels are forgiven. It's like Iblis when he was put in an imtihan, in a test, when he was tested, and Harut and Marut were tested. Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I fear, what if there is something other than what I know about myself in the knowledge of Allah Jalla wa Ala? Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the fear of that makes me cry. Meaning, what if there is something else written for me that Allah knows and I do not know, and I may end up in Jahannam? The moment Jibreel Amin said this, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam started to weep. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam started to shed tears. And the hadith says, both Jibreel Amin and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sitting together were continuously weeping in the fear of Allah, crying in the fear of Allah. Just imagine this spectacle. The Sayyidul Malaika, the master of all the angels, the Sardar of all the angels, and the Sardar and the master of all the prophets, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, both sitting together and crying with the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Then they heard a voice say that, O Jibreel and O beloved sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah Jalla wa Ala has protected you from his disobedience. You will never disobey them. Jibreel Amin then left from there, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came out, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw some Sahaba, some Ansar Sahaba. They were laughing and playing, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to the Ansar Sahaba, O Sahaba, if you knew what I know, then you would laugh less and cry a lot. You would laugh less and weep more if you knew what I know. And imagine how he is crying in the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and here we are content about something will happen, we'll see when time comes. Don't talk about Jahannam, don't talk about Qabr, don't talk about the hereafter. We are lovers of Allah, we are lovers, we are Ashiq Mustafa, we love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Undoubtedly the true lovers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have a great maqam in the eyes of Allah Jalla wa Ala. But what guarantee do you have that you are a true lover of Allah and a true lover of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? So this, when we keep thinking about and reminding ourselves about the accountability in the hereafter, Jahannam, and how the Prophet ﷺ, they were both crying and thinking about Jahannam and the punishments in Jahannam. Rasulullah ﷺ and Jibreel Amin, that will keep reminding us in the month of Ramadan when we are fasting. We fear Allah. This is why we don't eat. This is why we don't drink. Allah is watching me. Who doesn't eat and drink in the month of Ramadan, and if he looks at haram, if he listens to haram, if he speaks haram, if he uses his hand to commit haram. Eating and drinking is halal when you're not fasting. That which is halal becomes haram when you're fasting. Imagine the azab for the one who commits haram, which is always haram, and he commits that haram in the month of Ramadan. That is like the one who does not eat junk food, says it's bad for my health, but he starts consuming poison or something that will kill him. The way you would call that person a stupid person, in the same way, the one who is fasting but is still looking at haram, is still listening to haram, is still committing haram, touching haram. And remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which we mentioned last week, that the one who commits zina in the month of Ramadan or consumes wine in the month of Ramadan, then from that Ramadan till the next Ramadan, continuously the angels of the heavens, all the angels of the heavens and Allahu Jalla wa Ala, they curse that person. Continuously that person is being cursed by Allah and all the angels of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if this person was to die before the next Ramadan, then he will not have a single good deed that will save him from the fire of hell. He will not be forgiven. So in the month of Ramadan, if you stop eating and drinking, then we must constantly remind ourselves, Allah knows my state. Allah can see me. Allah is watching me. Allah dekh raha hai. This concept that we need to create. That is the first most important point in taqwa. So that we understand that we claim we have fear of Allah. We claim we have the khawf of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And we say, oh, only the deviants talk about azab. We are ashik, we are lovers of Allah and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are not bothered about azab, alayyazu billah. People make statements of kufr. This is a statement of kufr if someone says, we are lovers, I'm not bothered about azab of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And here the beloved of Allah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam with Jibreel Ameen is shedding tears. Why? With the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. In reality, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has the fear of Allah. He is crying with the fear of Allah, and he's also teaching us to shed tears in the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And he's asking Allah, crying in the court of Allah for the ummah, weeping in the court of Allah for the ummah, crying for the ummah. Allah kya jahannam ab bhi na sard hoga, ro ro ke Mustafa ne darya bha diya. Allah kya jahannam ab bhi na sard hoga, ro ro ke Mustafa ne darya baha di, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Sayyidina Mansur bin Imam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and he says that he had stopped in a place and at night time he could hear someone screaming and crying and asking Allah for forgiveness. So he stopped outside that person's house who was calling upon Allah, screaming and shouting and crying in the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala, calling upon Allah Jalla wa Ala. And he says, oh Allah, whenever I was sinning, not that I was unaware of you watching me, I knew that you were watching me, but Ya Allah, you have given me so much ease in dunya that it makes me brave in sinning. It makes me brave in sinning. It is the ease that you have given me, because you know there comes a time in life when the signals stop coming. Remember that time in your life when you sinned and a punishment came immediately. That is a sign of a beloved of Allah. One who sins and Allah punishes him immediately. But then there comes a time, if you keep insisting, if you keep sinning, if you keep committing sins and you do not make tawbah, there comes a time in your life when you sin and Allah stops punishing you. And that is the greatest punishment. That is the greatest punishment for a person, when the signals stop coming from Allah Jalla wa Ala. So Allah Jalla wa Ala sends reminders. When he stops sending reminders, that's a punishment. That's a great azab. So this person was saying, oh Allah, the ease that you had given me had made me brave in sinning. Ya Allah, this is why I kept sinning. But oh Allah, I sincerely ask you for forgiveness. Now this person was calling upon Allah Jalla wa Ala, begging Allah Jalla wa Ala for forgiveness. He was asking Allah to forgive him, and he was shouting and screaming and making dua and shedding tears with the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Constantly he was crying in the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Sayyidina Mansur bin Imam radiyallahu ta'ala, he said, I just remembered the Quranic verse about the fear of Allah and the azab of Allah. And he said in Surah At-Tahrim, verse 6, he said, I just recited that Quranic verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ku anfusakum wa ahlikum nara, wa quduha an-nasu wal hijara. He said, I recited this verse of the Quran in Surah At-Tahrim, which means, O believers, save yourselves and your families from the fire of hell. That fire, the fuel of which is humans and rocks. That fire of hell, the fuel of which is humans and rocks. He said, the moment I recited this, I heard someone fell to the ground. And I heard that person scream. And then I could not hear him after that. He said, I left from there. Afterwards, when I came back, I saw a lot of people outside the house. People were crying and people were mourning the loss of that person. And an old lady said that there was a man who read Surah Tahrim, verse 6 of Surah Tahrim, in which the azab of Allah Jalla wa Ala is mentioned. That man is a murderer of my son because he recited this verse of the Quran, and my son had so much khawf of Allah, so much fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. He shouldn't have recited this verse of Quran. It is him reciting the verse of Quran that led to the death of my son. This man was surprised. He recited the verse of Quran because he knew that this person was crying in the fear of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So what happened? He said, I went home, I went to sleep, and I saw a person in my dream. He said to me, do you know I am the same person who was crying in the fear of Allah? I am the same person who was crying with the khawf of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and you recited Surah Tahrim. Because of that I died. That was the cause of my death. Sayyidina Abu Mansur Imam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, Ma fa'alallahu bik. How did Allah treat you? What happened to you? Were you forgiven or were you punished? He said, Allah treated me the way He treated the shuhada of Badr. Allah treated me the way He treated the martyrs of Badr. He said, how did Allah treat you like the way He treated the martyrs of Badr? He said, the martyrs of Badr were killed with the sword of the kuffar, and I was killed with the sword of ishq. This is ishq, this is love. He said, the martyrs of Badr, they were murdered, they were killed, they were martyred with the sword of the kuffar, of non-Muslims, and I was killed with the sword of ishq. This is the real ishq. He loved Allah Jalla wa Ala. So he wasn't crying only with the fear and azab of Allah. He was crying with the love of Allah because he feared the displeasure of Allah Jalla wa Ala. He was the true lover of Allah Jalla wa Ala. This concept constantly we will think about throughout the month of Ramadan. Allah dekh raha hai. Allah, the moment your eye wants to look at haram, your ears want to listen to haram, your tongue wants to say something which is haram, constantly remind yourselves, Allah dekh raha hai. Allah knows my state. Allahu Akbar. Sallallahu ala Muhammadin nabiyyin ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallim wa salli alayhi. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma narrates, O sinful person, do not become fearless about an evil death, bad death. When you commit a sin, once you've committed a sin, then do not commit a greater sin after that. It is as if you have become shameless. You have no shame. You have become immodest, and you do not care about the two angels that you have with you, the angel on the right and the angel on the left. He says, O sinful person, do not become fearless about evil death. You may die a bad death, an evil maut. And it says, if you've committed a sin, then after committing the sin, do not commit a greater sin.
Ramadhan, 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 ya Habib.
मोहतरम हिब्बा, आज का ख़ुसूसी विर्द ये सहरी के टाइम का विर्द है, सुहूर का विर्द है। जो शख्स सहरी के वक्त ये कलाम 7 मरतबा पढ़ लेता है, अव्वल आखिर दुरूद शरीफ, और आसमान की तरफ निगाह उठा के अगर आप ये कलाम 7 मरतबा पढ़ते हैं, अव्वल आखिर दुरूद शरीफ, तो हर सितारे के बदले अल्लाह जल्ला व अला आपके नामा अमाल में 1000 नेकियां लिख देता है, और हर सितारे के बदले 1000 गुनाह मुआफ़ हो जाएंगे और 1000 दरजात बुलंद हो जाएंगे। यानी ये शख्स ये कलाम 7 मरतबा पढ़ लेता है अव्वल आखिर दुरूद शरीफ, तो हर सितारे के बदले अल्लाह जल्ला व अला उसके नामा आमाल में 1000 नेकियां दर्ज फरमा देता है, 1000 गुनाह मुआफ़ हो जाते हैं, और हर सितारे के बदले 1000 दर्जात बुलंद हो जाते हैं। इस पर अमल करने का इरादा कर लीजिए। ये रमज़ान मुबारक का ख़ास तोहफ़ा है। ये कलाम लिख लीजिए, नोट कर लीजिए। ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाहुल हय्युल क़य्यूमुल क़ाइमु अला कुल्ली नफ्सिन बिमा कसबत। ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाहुल हय्युल क़य्यूमुल क़ाइमु अला कुल्ली नफ्सिन बिमा कसबत। सल्लल्लाहु अला मुहम्मदिन नबिय्यिल उम्मी व अला आलिहि व सहबिहि व बारिक व सल्लिम व सल्लि अलैहि। Brothers and sisters in Islam, today's litany is for suhoor time, for sahri time. If you were to recite the following kalam at sahri time, if one was to look in the direction of the sky and recite this 7 times and send blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ before it and after it, and at the time of suhoor, meaning before Fajr Salah starts, before the beginning of Salatul Fajr, If you were to recite this in the month of Ramadan, looking in the direction of the sky, and you recite this kalam 7 times, sending blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ before it and after it, for every star in the sky, 1,000 good deeds will be written in your account, 1,000 sins will be forgiven, and 1,000 darajat, 1,000 maqam and status and ranks will be increased, inshallah. You can take note of this. La ilaha illallah al-hayyul qayyum al-qa'im ala kulli nafsin bima kasabat. La ilaha illallah al-hayyul qayyum al-qa'im ala kulli nafsin bima kasabat. La ilaha illallah al-hayyul qayyum al-qa'im ala kulli nafsin bima kasabat.